helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, Canadian certified counselor and award-winning psychotherapist.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Life Transformation Show. I am Bettina Davomar, co-host for today, with award-winning psychotherapist Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services. Today's show is about one of the most important aspects of couples relationship, couples communication. Picture the following scenario. You just discovered that your husband has lied to you that he was at work when he was in fact at the casino gambling away your limited family income. How would you address this with your spouse? Would you go for days sulking and not saying anything to your partner? Number 2, meet him as he comes through the door screaming, "How could you?" Number 3, put on a sermon about liars going to hell. Or number 4, sit him down and express how you feel and why you won't accept deception. In your relationship, your approach determines your communication style. Today, Michael will be addressing communication styles and their impact on a couple's relationship. And now, here is my co-host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services. Welcome, Michael.
Welcome, Bettina. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of the Life Transformation Show and filling in for Melissa. This topic is such a very important topic, Bettina, because we will be talking about something that determines a quality of a couple's relationship. And John Gottman, who did research on couples' relationship and why some couples remain married and why others end in divorce, basically came to the conclusion that it wasn't the type of problems that couples have that determined whether or not the relationship lasted, but how they went about their conflict. And so communication and the style of your communication determines how you go about the style of your conflict. So today we're going to be looking at 4 basic communication styles, their impact and their impact on couples' relationship. But I wanted to welcome my listeners who are, maybe you're joining us for the first time. Thank you very much for joining us in this episode of the Life Transformation Show. And if you are new, our number is 1-877-544-3546. We are a professional counseling organization that provides counseling from a Christian perspective. And you can find out more about us by going to our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. And so, Bettina, as we go into today's show, I wanted to use a passage of scripture as we often do on this show. And my challenge to the listener today is, as you listen to the show, see if you can tell which of the communication style is being used by the wife of David, Michal, in this story that I'm going to read. And it's from 2 Samuel chapter 6 from verse 20 to 22. And so the first person to call and to say which style it is will get a recognition on our Facebook as the winner of this contest. So here it is, 2 Samuel chapter 6, quote, "When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, 'How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar feller would.' David said to Michal, 'It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people of Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord.'" So we have this communication that is going on between Michal and David, and we see her approach to David, where she's calling him vulgar and maybe feeling a little bit insecure about the attention attention that her man David is getting from all these slave girls who might have been looking at David with lustful eyes as he danced and rejoiced before them. And so the communication style that Michael had in this dialogue, in this narrative, will be one of the four. So see if you can tell which of the four is it.
Now, Michael, in your workshops and conferences, you say that there are basically 4 communication styles. What is the first communication style out of the 4?
The first communication style is what we call the passive communicator, or the passive communication style. And in this style, as the name suggests, spouses or the person communicating does not address the issue directly, or if they do it in a very feeble manner. And so they fail to assert themselves and to say what it is that's really the problem that needs to address. Or they tend to speak in very shy, apologetic ways and present themselves as if their needs don't really matter. And so this kind of communication doesn't address the issue and sometimes leads to bigger problems down the road.
So now, Michael, if someone has passive communication style, how would that have an impact on their relationship?
So one of the impact on the relationship would be that issues, as I said, would become more magnified over time, but also the quality of life between the spouse would deteriorate, because when you keep issues on the inside, you're becoming more and more depressed, more and more unhappy. So I like your example in the beginning, Bettina, when you talk about this person who is going around sulking for days.
Right.
When you are sulking, your body is secreting hormones that is creating stress for your body, and it's going to have an impact on your health over time, as opposed to if the issue was addressed in the first day that it happened and you became together again as a couple and you're happy and you move on. This drawing out of the issue leads to depression in the person who is passive, but it also leads to a dysfunction that continues in the relationship because the issue is not being resolved. This person in your gambling example is not taken to task for what he has done, and so is likely to continue in the dysfunction unchallenged because the person who is passive has not addressed him directly.
Now, I can see how that's really important to address that situation, and how the passive communication style is somewhat an easy way for the other person to just let things go. Now, what would that, at the childhood factors, can we talk a little bit about that? What childhood factors that may have led to someone becoming or having that passive communication?
One of the childhood factor could be that maybe this person has never seen conflict in their household growing up. So it could be that extreme where conflict was never demonstrated. Maybe they had a passive mother or passive father that never really address any of the issues in their home. Or sometimes it can be the opposite, where maybe conflict meant things would go flying and there would be a lot of danger and chaos. And so someone who is from that either end of that extreme could either, number one, is not used to conflict, or number two, is afraid of conflict because of the extreme. And so when they think of addressing a situation with their spouse, instead of going to that situation boldly and speaking about it, they are triggered by the situation because of things that happened in their childhood, and so they keep it on the inside and they sulk instead of bringing things out in the open.
Wow. Now, we've talked about passive communication style being the first one. What is the second communication style?
The second communication style is the aggressive communication style. So people who are aggressive, they go about their communication in a way that they tend to humiliate others, they dominate others, and they speak in such way that they're frustrated and overwhelmed. And what ends up happening is that they exude a lot of emotion in what they're saying. And as a result of that, sometimes the issues become lost. So the aggressive communicator may think that if I speak loudly and I speak angrily, I am going to be heard by my spouse. But one of the things that research show is that you actually do the opposite, because when you speak loudly and angrily, all the person is hearing is that you're an angry, out of control person. And so a lot of times the issue is left unresolved and the focus becomes, how could you become so angry? Why do you have to be so aggressive? And you have your rights and you end up losing it by becoming too aggressive in your communication style.
And so how would that impact the relationship?
If you have a spouse who is yelling, and I think that was the second example that you gave of this person who would meet their partner at the door even before they come through the door and start yelling and screaming, how could you?
Right.
If you have that kind of approach, then it makes it very difficult to resolve issue, because when you attack a person, then what happens? The person becomes defensive. And a lot of times, if you have a spouse that is intimidated by your aggressiveness, they're not going to be able to talk to you in a way that can bring about a resolution. So the aggressive communicator, just like the passive communicator, often cause the issue to remain unresolved because of their approach to the situation. So another impact that it can have on the relationship is that because of the aggressiveness, the anger, the outbursts, the throwing of things or the slamming of doors and all of that, it eats away at the love and closeness and intimacy in the relationship, because you are not going to feel warm and fuzzy feeling for a partner who has just yelled at you and swear at you with Christian expletives. I know Christians have their own kind of expletives, and so and so someone who have just used those words at you, you're not going to spend the rest of the evening feeling feelings of endearment. And so it has impact on other things like the sex life of the couples relationship, the closest that the couples feel. But also it can create a situation where if you're aggressive, your partner will tend to go more to secrecy than openness, because they're going to feel as if I can't share anything with this person. I can't really tell my failures and my faults because this person is out of control. My spouse is out of control and he's going to become aggressive and mean. If you have just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Show. I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services, and with me in studio today is Bettina, and we are discussing today effective couples communication, and we're looking at 4 communication styles. And if you have missed the scripture that we read earlier, it is from 1 Samuel chapter 6 verse 22 to 22 was the scripture that we read. 2 Samuel 6 verse 22. And the challenge that we have here going is see if you can identify which of the communication style is being used in that passage. Again, Elim, you can contact us at 1-877-544-3546, or you can go to our website at elimcounselingministry.com. If you want to listen to the first part of this episode or other podcasts that we have done, you can access our YouTube channel by going to our website, and there is a link right at the top of the page that will take you to our Facebook page. So thank you again for joining us. So Bettina, I almost call you Melissa. So Bettina, we're discussing this topic of couples communication. We have just discussed the aggressive communication style and some of the impact that it has. But one of the other impact that it has on the family is that if there are children involved, there can be psychological damage to children who are hearing this loud, violent outburst from someone. And little kids, when they see two big adults acting loud and violent, they are stressed because they don't know where this is going to lead. And they feel a lot of fear at times looking at their parents acting and speaking with these loud volumes.
Right. And so that's interesting that you mentioned that, because the next question I was going to ask is what childhood factors may have led that person to have that aggressive communication styles.
A person who see aggressiveness as a child, we talk about the impact on children, and that's one of the impact it can have. If you grow up in a home where you see aggressive communication style, you can have one or two response. You can either become aggressive yourself and become the passive type of communicator, or you can become the passive type of communicator, or you become aggressive yourself and become very loud and violent, because you tend to develop a template, a pattern that you saw in your childhood as being what is familiar to you. And so when someone is from a home where they have this aggressiveness, they can tend towards becoming aggressive communicator as well. But people who are aggressive and loud, it could also be as a result of anxiety and feeling as if their life is out of control, and feeling a sense of powerlessness. And so they feel, except I dominate and control this person, then I am not going to have any power in this relationship. I am losing my control. So a lot of aggressive communicators feel that they have to resort to aggressiveness to maintain control of their relationship. And this could be driven by anxiety or fear as well.
So we talked, Michael, about the passive communication style being the first, and then the second being the aggressive communication style. What is the third communication style?
The third communication style is the passive-aggressive communication style, right? So people who are passive-aggressive, they are not as withdrawn as the passive communicator, and they are not as aggressive as the aggressive communicator. They fall somewhere in between the two range, and they tend to be a lot more closer to the passive side than the aggressive side, but they're passive aggressive. So they will do things like they will use sarcasm. So, that example of the gambling addiction that you just used, instead of coming out and saying, you have this gambling habit and we need to deal with it. Maybe you need to go get help for counseling. They might start making jokes about gamblers.
Right.
And it's a kind of a hint that, you're a gambler and you need to do something about it. And the passive aggressive, to the spiritualize the example that you gave in the introduction about someone putting on a sermon about liars going to hell or gamblers going to hell.
Yes.
Right? So you're not coming right out and saying what you're doing is wrong and you need to deal with it, and there are biblical reasons why it is wrong. Instead, you start playing sermons loud in the house, about gamblers and liars burning in hellfire. Or you may decide to have a home Bible study, where you invite the pastor over and the topic just happened to be liars and gamblers. And your spouse has to sit there and go through
endure
that. So that's part of the passive aggressive.
Good. So then, Michael, what would be the impact of that passive-aggressive on the relationship?
So passive-aggressive communicators usually create a situation where they remain stuck in the issue, and the issue is not resolved because these sarcasm and these sermons that you're doing is not really speaking to the heart of the issue. So it might give you a sense of doing something, but it's not really addressing the issue. And so this sarcasm leave you stuck in the issue. But what it also does is that it builds resentment in the passive aggressive person, because you might have played 10 sermon about gambling and liars going to hell, and the person is just so selfish that, or so out of touch with what they're doing, that they don't even realize that this sermon is about them. They might even come to you and say, that was a very good sermon, wasn't it? I really enjoyed it. You know,
it would have defeated the purpose.
Yeah, can you imagine people who are liars and gamblers? And yes, I agree, they need to go to hell, and you're even more frustrated because it was meant to create this guilt, but in fact the person is enjoying it. And so it can lead to more frustration and more resentment. And people who are passive aggressive sometimes creates a situation where there is emotional distance in the relationship, because this passive aggressiveness pulls you apart, because there can be no true intimacy if you're not speaking about the issues and trying to resolve them.
And so then the next part of the question would be, what the childhood factors, what would have brought that on?
Childhood factors could be similar to either the passive or the aggressive, but one other thing we notice about people who are passive aggressive is that a lot of time they tend to have parents who were conflict adverse. Right. So if you had a parent that was afraid of addressing issues and use passive aggressiveness on you. Let us say that when you did something wrong, you would find that your mom would sulk, or she would make these kind of remarks and jokes about you instead of really addressing you directly. You learn, the Bible talks about training up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Mm. We train children sometimes not by what we say to them and what we teach them, but by what they see us doing. True. And that's the more powerful mode of learning. So a lot of people who are passive aggressive, they see this displayed in their family growing up. But other reasons could be they developed a sense of powerlessness because maybe they were dominated by others in their family growing up. Maybe they didn't have a voice. They weren't allowed to have a voice as a child. They could never speak up about their needs. They were made to feel that their needs were not important. And so instead of coming out and speaking up about the needs, they try passive aggressive ways instead. Right.
And so we've talked about the passive communication style, the aggressive communication style, and then we gotta kind of have like the one that has both of them in there, the passive aggressive. What's the fourth one?
The fourth one is the assertive communication style. And the assertive communication style is the best style of all. It's the style that is most effective. And it allows us to have our needs met, but also allows for our partner's growth and development. The sad things that I see in a lot of Christian marriages is that sometimes the way that we approach conflict results in our partners being stuck in a cycle of sin. The assertive communication style is found in Matthew, where Jesus talks about if your brother is overtaken in a fault, you go to your brother and you show him his fault directly. Mm-hmm. And if he failed to deal with his faults, then you bring witnesses so that the matters may be established in front of 2 or 3 witnesses. And so this is the assertive style. And so assertive communication style deals with the issue head on, but not in rage, not in anger, like the other style where things are just out of control, like the aggressive communication style. Mm-hmm. They deal with things head on. And so what would happen if someone has a situation to address? They would sit their spouse down and say, no, honey, there's something that we really need to talk about. When you did that the other day by going out and saying that you were at work when you were in fact gambling, it make me feel as if I cannot trust you. It make me feel I don't know who you are because I thought I could trust you. And we cannot have a relationship that is built on a lack of trust. And so this is a way of talking about how you feel, the impact on the relationship, and so on.
It's interesting because you're not actually pointing the finger in this aggressive. You're actually speaking about how you feel about the situation.
Right, and yes.
And so then the impact would probably be positive, right?
Yeah, positive impact. So it leads to feelings of control. People who can be assertive feel as if they have control of their lives. They also feel safe in their relationship because they feel I can speak up for my needs. I can make myself heard. And so it creates this atmosphere in which issues can be worked through and resolved, and you can move on instead of being stuck like in the other communication styles, or where people are at a loss as to whether or not the issue is being, the perpetrator isn't even aware that the issue is being addressed, such as with the passive aggressive style. And it creates an environment that is very positive for kids. So when couples come in and they tell me that they never have a conflict, I don't think that's a good thing, because it often means that someone is being aggressive, not aggressive, but passive or passive aggressive. And so seeing assertiveness displayed in front of children is very good. Children need to know that their parents can speak about challenging issues and still be in love with each other, still go to bed happy at the end of the day. The Bible talk about being angry and sinning not. And I think the assertive style is just that, where you can express your displeasure over things, but in a way that's calm and control. So I see that, Betty, we have quickly come to the end of today's show, and so we have to wrap it up here for today. But if you have any questions about what we have discussed today, please feel free to give us a call. Remember that we have this challenge out. If you can be the first one to call in to say which communication style is used in 2 Samuel 6 verse 20 to 22, we'll be happy to hear from you. And so we also want to remind you of our upcoming healing retreat on the weekend of June 7 to 9. And if you want to know how to get a hold of us, you can go to our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. Or you can call us at 1-877-544-3546. And so until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services, and
Bettina Davelmar.
Thanking you very much for joining us on this show, and praying together that God would bless you in all your relationships and to keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.